In the early 1800s, the United States was expanding at a breakneck pace. Settlers were pushing west, new towns were springing up literally overnight, and a young nation was vigorously charting its future. But to truly understand American history, we have to look at the shadows cast by that rapid growth. This explainer is going to take us through one of the absolute darkest chapters in America's past, a defining era of exile, but honestly also an incredible testament to human resilience. We're going to look closely at the story of the Trail of Tears. Okay, let's dive into this. While the narrative of the 1800s is so often painted as this era of boundless opportunity and progress, behind that rapid expansion lies a much more complex story. It's a story of broken promises, forced removal, and just immense suffering. Because the creation of those new western towns and the economic boom of the young nation didn't just happen in a vacuum. It happened on lands that were already home to vibrant, deeply established societies.
Section 1. The demand for lands. For centuries, the southeastern United States wasn't some empty frontier. It was the ancestral home of several Native American nations. We're talking about the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Seminole peoples. And these weren't loosely gathered groups. These were sovereign nations with their own established governments, rich cultures, schools, and tightly knit communities. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how the highly assimilated Cherokee society was threatened. The Cherokee Nation had intentionally adopted many aspects of American society. They developed their own written language, published their own newspapers, and even established a constitutional government. But pressing against them was this overwhelming force. American settlers, state governments, and land speculators were just hungry for that territory. And in 1828, a massive catalyst hit, the discovery of gold in Georgia. Suddenly, thousands of settlers rushed into Cherokee territory hoping to strike it rich, and the pressure for native removal reached an absolute boiling point.
Section 2. Politics and Broken Promises.
This brings us to a period really defined by intense political maneuvering and profound betrayal. You see, the greed for land and gold wasn't just a grassroots movement of settlers, it was institutionalized. The groundwork for physical removal was deliberately laid in the halls of government. Let's walk through this timeline, because it shows exactly how systemic this was. Following the 1828 gold rush, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. This law authorized the federal government to negotiate treaties to relocate Native American nations west of the Mississippi River. Now, supporters of this act claimed it would protect Native Americans from conflict with settlers, but in reality, Native communities strongly opposed it. This wasn't just property to them. This was sacred land. It was where their ancestors were buried and where their traditions had been rooted for generations.
The Cherokee Nation actually chose to fight this removal policy through the American legal system, and they won. In 1832, they took their case to the United States Supreme Court. In the landmark case Worcester v. Georgia, the court ruled directly in favor of Cherokee sovereignty, explicitly stating that the state of Georgia had absolutely no authority over Cherokee lands. It should have been a massive victory. But in a shocking display of broken promises, federal authorities simply ignored it. They completely failed to enforce the court's decision, leaving the future of the Cherokee people in severe jeopardy.
So the crucial point is how the government finally forced the issue. In 1835, a very small, unauthorized group of Cherokee leaders signed what is known as the Treaty of New Eshota. This agreement exchanged all Cherokee lands in the southeast for territory in present-day Oklahoma. The vast majority of the Cherokee people completely opposed this agreement, correctly arguing the signers had zero authority to give away their nation's land. Yet, despite this overwhelming opposition, the United States Senate ratified the treaty. And get this, they ratified it by exactly one single vote.
Section 3. The forced removal begins.
The Cherokee were given a deadline to leave their homeland. Unsurprisingly, many simply refused to go, holding on to their rightful legal claim to their homes. But the federal government was determined to act. In 1838, President Martin Van Buren gave the official order for the forced removal to proceed. 7,000. I want you to sit with that number for a second. That is the number of heavily armed soldiers that entered Cherokee territory to enforce this eviction. Imagine being in your home, on your ancestral land, and an actual army arrives to force you out with virtually no warning.
Soldiers gathered men, women, and children, and literally herded them into temporary camps. Families were allowed to take only a few meager possessions. Their homes, their cultivated farms, their livestock, and their personal belongings were all just left behind. And the conditions in these holding camps were absolutely brutal. They suffered extreme overcrowding and incredibly poor sanitation. Because of this, disease spread like wildfire. Even before the physical march west began, many people were already gravely sick.
Section 4. The tragic journey west.
Then came the march itself. And this wasn't some coordinated, safe relocation. It was a grueling, terrifying, forced migration into the unknown, pushing human endurance to its absolute breaking point. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the ordeal. 1,000 miles. That is the distance these groups had to travel. And they weren't taking trains or modern paved roads. They traveled by foot, by wagon, and by boat across incredibly difficult terrain. They had to navigate rivers, cross mountain ranges, and trudge through miles of muddy, impassable roads. This agonizing trip lasted for months.
The elements alone were a nightmare. As the Cherokee moved westward, they faced extreme weather conditions. The punishing summer heat utterly exhausted the travelers, and then the seasons turned, bringing freezing winter cold, deep snow, and thick ice. Food was desperately scarce. Disease continued to rip through the camps and along the trail. The elderly couldn't keep pace. Children fell gravely ill. Families were forced into the unimaginable position of watching their loved ones weaken day after day, burying them beside the road, and then having to just keep walking because they had no other choice.
Eyewitness accounts from this time are truly heartbreaking. One Cherokee survivor later recalled a memory of the journey that stayed vivid for the rest of their life. They described seeing a continuous line of people stretching across the landscape, just an endless line of suffering, walking out of their history and into exile.
The human toll of this forced removal is staggering. Historians estimate that approximately 4,000 Cherokee people perished, 4,000 lives lost to disease, to starvation, to sheer exhaustion, and to exposure to the elements during the removal process.
While the phrase Trail of Tears is most often associated with the Cherokee removal, it is so vital to understand that it symbolizes a much wider tragedy. The Cherokee were not the only nation affected. The Choctaw, the Creek, the Chickasaw, and the Seminole peoples also experienced brutal forced removals. In total, tens of thousands of Native Americans were displaced from their ancestral lands across the Southeast during this era. The suffering was monumental and incredibly widespread.
Section 5. Survival and lasting legacy. Let's move to and see how this builds into the final chapter. Because, as vital as it is to understand the tragedy, the story does not end there. This is not just a story of loss and victimization. It is also a profound story of agency, survival, and lasting legacy. When the survivors finally reached what is now Oklahoma, their ordeal was far from over. Imagine standing in an unfamiliar territory after losing so much, facing the ultimate question: how do you rebuild a nation from scratch?
The answer lies in their incredible endurance. Despite everything they had suffered, the Cherokee Nation survived. They set to work immediately. They constructed new homes and planted new farms. They didn't just survive physically, though. They reorganized their constitutional government. They rebuilt their schools. And most importantly, they fiercely protected and preserved their cultural traditions. Their ability to rebuild their communities from literally nothing in a strange land became a powerful testament to the unbreakable strength of their people.
Today, the Trail of Tears stands as one of the most tragic episodes in American history. It's a solemn reminder that what was viewed as progress and expansion by some came at a devastating, irreversible cost to others. Across the United States today, memorials, museums, and historical sites, like the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, exist to help preserve the memory of those who suffered and to challenge us to remember this history honestly. It's a stark reminder of the consequences when policies ignore the rights and voices of Native peoples.
The story of the Trail of Tears is a story of immense pain, but also of extraordinary survival. Native nations endured. They maintained their identities, and they continue to shape American history today. So I'll leave you with this final thought. As we honor the incredible resilience of those who survived this forced exile, how will we ensure that the true human cost of America's history is never forgotten? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you found this valuable, please take a moment to engage with the material, and join us next time as we continue to unpack the complexities of our